This is Gender in Focus. I'm Elle, and each week I sit down with the president of Transfocus Consulting and all-round gender diversity genius, Kai Scott. I get to ask all the questions you've ever wanted to ask about how to make the workplace and the world a better place for trans and non-binary people. Let's get into it.
In today's episode, we are getting into a very common concern that allies of trans and non-binary people share with us in hushed whispers. They are scared of getting something wrong unknowingly and then having people mad at them. As a result, allies hesitate, avoid, and are often quiet. This doesn't go away with a simple thought of don't worry about it. We get into the root cause and provide practical tips to move through these feelings into a more productive place. We share our own allyship stories because we're all figuring it out together. So I'm really excited to get into this topic with you, Elle. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah. Really excited to delve into and hopefully demystify fear of getting it wrong.
It's a good topic today. I feel like this is the one that I just, myself included, it's like that squirming feeling, that dread of getting things wrong. We're all, I think, to some degree, will have this level of perfectionism. So the idea of getting anything wrong, but then throw into the mix the way that it can affect other people. Most people don't love that feeling. So
no, not at all.
We've talked before about how this fear of getting it wrong can really hold us back from fulfilling our potential as allies. So how have you seen that show up?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a big heart for allies. I'm an ally myself for other equity groups or even within my community. But I will say that even though it seems like it's coming from a good place, it has this unintended negative consequence, right? And I see that in my own story as well, where, we think we're expressing a caring by kind of removing ourselves from a situation or not saying something because we're not quite sure if we should say something or how to say it or what to say, so many questions, and we kind of get stuck in our own heads in a way that we are not present to the situation with the person in front of us, and we're also not able to take action. We kind of just get frozen in place, and then unfortunately we're also not able to get to know somebody in a more a deeper way. So it prevents all these things from happening. It also prevents us from helping those who perhaps they're struggling on their journey of being respectful towards trans and non-binary folks. And so, it has all these kind of, as I said, negative consequences in many different directions. And so that's where it's really sad that this happens, even though it's a pretty common occurrence. But why we're pretty motivated to help people, and ourselves included, to kind of walk through that.
It's definitely such a familiar feeling. For me, and I'll say, from moving from Britain to Canada, my knowledge of Indigenous communities in Canada was severely lacking.
Right.
Through lack of education at home and also not really understanding the impact, especially from the country that I'm from, the massive impact that has had.
Right.
That feeling of, I really don't want to get this wrong because it has had such massive impacts. So I could definitely feel that, that stress and that tension of wanting to get things right because I care, but then feeling like I just don't want to say anything then in that case because I don't want to show up in the wrong way. So for allies of trans and non-binary people, that I have a lot of love for that fear because I know what that's like, and I think most of us probably do to some degree. But it really does hold us back from showing up at all. Then, in that case, and from what you've seen, the main fear that a lot of people have when it comes to trans people and what their mistakes, what will happen if they make a mistake.
Yeah. Usually we mentally play out a bit of a story that we think will happen. I do this myself. I'll say, okay, I can see myself in the future saying something and then maybe a facial expression on the other end. Like you can almost visualize this
Yeah, for
too, right?
sure.
It's just like, okay, and then this is going to happen, and then this, and then they're going to say something, or somebody else might say something,
Mhm,
and they're going to be mad. They're going to judge me and say I'm a
mhm.
horrible person. On and on. And like you can be quite elaborate in this story, where many different threads come up in, and then suddenly like we're like my shoulders are up to my ears. you know my heart is racing, my stomach is a knot, and but I'm still just like me with me, right?
Mhm.
Like it's
Yeah, nothing's actually happened.
nothing's actually happened. That person, I have not connected with the person across from me, if they're across from me, or maybe maybe in the future there might be, but just like, yeah, it's not based in reality, right? And it's not to say that
Sure.
no harm can be done, but it's important not to anticipate it, right?
Mhm.
In a way that locks us up and can prevent us from actually growing and learning and understanding what's happening for somebody. And that might include some missteps along the way, right?
For
And
sure.
that there's actually value to those. Not to say we want to use missteps as a basis for learning. We can learn without doing missteps. But if they do occur, like it is actually really important that we pay attention and not kind of be absorbed in our own, like, I can't believe I did this,
Mhm,
even though that's a very natural response.
mhm.
Uh, and I think a lot of people have that type of response to show that they care. So it's like, if like I get the psychology of like being very elaborate in one's apology, or I can't believe I did this, you must think I'm horrible, like kind of flogging themselves, right, on
Yeah.
display to that person to show just how sincere. And the thing is, though, that if you place yourself in that situation on the receiving end of that, it is very kind of like, whoa, that's a lot of energy
Mhm.
coming at somebody, and in a way that some people might even block. It's so much, right? And it's difficult to manage. Or some people then might kick into, I got to take care of this person who just made a
Yeah.
mistake, so it's just like these weird dynamics.
Mhm,
But if somebody can stay present with the person, that is actually a greater sign of caring than this more like show of caring,
mhm,
which is a bit counterintuitive. So there's a bit there to unpack, to realize what we're doing,
mhm.
to make ourselves conscious of that, so that we can choose other ways of showing up with people, even if we have made a mistake. But a
Mhm.
common stressful thought that people have is, my mistakes will hurt trans people. They've already made a foregone conclusion that every single time they make a mistake, trans people will be hurt. And there's a lot there that can be unpacked, and not all of it is exactly true.
Mhm. When you say not all of it is exactly true, what do you mean?
Hmm. Yeah, this is where we do what we're calling stress-free allyship, because I feel I see the value in people being more relaxed to be able to be effective allies. And
Mhm.
with the my mistakes will hurt trans people, people may not realize that not every single time a trans person may be upset. Uh, it depends on the day, the situation, what's happening. Sometimes people's intention can be a factor in it. A lot of the times, trans people can tell people's intentions, right?
Mhm.
By the way they said it, that they're apologizing, all these factors. And so that trans person might not get hurt. Uh, and it's not to take away from the fact that some trans people will be hurt, right? But it's just
Mhm.
not painting everybody with the same brush and automatically assuming harm. It's being present to whether or not there is harm, and then figuring out a way how to address that harm, right? So there's a few
Mhm.
steps to be available for as an ally, as a supporter, uh, rather than just stamp, hurt, was done, end of
Mhm.
story. I determine, not the other person, right? So it's
Sure.
just realizing that dynamic, and being available to what's there.
Mhm. You mentioned about that kind of laboring the apology, and I know I've talked before about how that was, for a while, that was my kind of initial response
Mm.
to making a mistake, and it wasn't until, as you said, it wasn't until somebody did it to me with
Uh,
a mistake that they had made, that I realized how annoying it is to be on the receiving end of that. It's exhausting to
yeah,
be kind of hurt by something, or I wasn't actually particularly hurt by it. It was just more of a calling someone in situation.
yeah.
And the apology that went on for 15 minutes
Oh,
made me
wow.
start getting annoyed about the situation. Uh, and so there is something to be said for just owning it and not laboring it. But I wanted to then ask you what that actually looks like in terms of processing a mistake that's been made.
So what do we do instead, right? I mean,
Hmm.
certainly acknowledging and correcting the mistake is part of it, but that may not change the guilt that one feels. And
Hmm.
I think it's important and it's okay to feel guilty, right? And then what do you do with that guilt, right? It's not
Hmm.
like you could be like, okay, I shouldn't feel guilty. That never really helps,
No.
right? Oh, I didn't think about that. It's like guilt is there. What do I do with it? It's really helpful to go and talk to other folks, right?
Hmm.
Who perhaps on their own allyship journeys, and that you can just debrief about that and be like, I felt like such an idiot. And then this happened. And then I said that. And, you know, you can really just like unpack it with somebody and express the feelings that are coming up or the disappointment or the whatever and name it and, you know, have it be validated by somebody, right? It's just not with the person that you made a
Hmm.
mistake with, right? And so it's just figuring out where to place that kind of discomfort or challenge as a way to help move through it, because once
Hmm.
you kind of talk it through, it really lifts the weight of that moment in a way that allows you to be, again, more available with that person and not so anxious. Because oftentimes if that guilt or whatever the remaining feelings, those stay and
Yeah.
then they still interact when you come back in contact with that person, or
Hmm.
you might just avoid that person altogether, right? Like some people adopt that as a strategy, but then oftentimes that other person feels that and are like,
Hmm.
oh, why are they avoiding me, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that can also have an impact, right? So it's just all this challenge. But if you process it with somebody else, there's a lot of value to be able to come back to that in a more natural, relaxed way that
Hmm.
is more productive.
Right. I think like there is such a you can reframe guilt, or at least use guilt as a tool,
Mm,
because like one of the things that's helped me when I've made one of the many mistakes I've made is seeing guilt as a way for me to see where my values are.
mm,
And so if I did something that has made me feel guilty, that tells me immediately that I have missed integrity, or I have
right.
missed a value of mine. And
Huh.
that's a great lesson to, like, it teaches you what you like and what you don't like. It teaches you values about yourself that maybe you didn't know, or that you
Mm,
didn't realize to what degree. So it's, I use it anyway as a tool. It's a horrible tool. I wish it's a very uncomfortable tool,
yeah,
but it
yeah.
is a tool. If you want it to be, you can use it, and then that can then teach you to not make the same mistake again, or to be a bit more mindful about it, but not in a way of flogging yourself and
Mm,
being furious with yourself, not as a way to induce shame, but as
mm.
a way to encourage a change of behavior, or to even just understand yourself better, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's a gentleness to it as well. I like what you're describing. It's, not blaming and shaming, but recognizing it's a catalyst for change.
Hmm.
It's, ringing a little bell that you can respond to or not, but there's benefit to oneself in exploring that a bit further.
Hmm.
And then we're not so avoidant of guilt, right? Because,
Hmm.
I mean, fair enough. You're right. It is a difficult, uncomfortable emotion. And
Hmm.
but there's something there that is valuable to everybody involved, so might as well
Hmm.
go take a look.
Hmm. For
Yeah.
sure, if you want to.
Mhm. Yeah.
In a previous episode, you talked about the discomfort of just sitting with someone when they're upset, and that
Mm,
we really shy away from that. And it's especially hard when we're the ones that have caused that upset.
mm,
Can you talk about that? Because you talked about it really beautifully
mm.
after a recording. We weren't even recording when you said it. So, yeah,
Okay, okay, I
I
love
want to
it.
get it on record.
From the vaults. Yeah, it's so true. Hey,
Mm.
And I have my own experiences of that. And I will say there's such a beauty in being together with somebody. I think oftentimes we're solution oriented in our
Mhm.
society. We're like, okay, I've done something and now I got to like fix it. Like
Yeah.
action, whatever that might be for whoever, right? Rather than just sitting and listening. And
Mhm.
that is, I, we don't develop listening skills a lot, at least not intentionally in our society, and so they can be underdeveloped. It might be feel like a stretch to listen,
Right.
and we also have to. We were just talking about guilt, but still feel the guilt of
Mhm.
when they talk about the impacts on them about what was said or done or whatnot. But just allowing people the space to talk as much or as little or whatever they want to do is a very powerful thing. It doesn't feel like very action oriented or
Mhm.
producing outcomes, quote unquote, but people get to identify. I will say, especially for trans and non-binary folks, oftentimes issues are immediately dismissed. Like,
Mhm.
that's not a thing. Sorry you feel that way. Like very weird responses,
Mhm.
but rarely are trans and non-binary folks given space to talk about and to sometimes they even have to like actively think through they feel the impact but then have to put words to it. And for somebody who is able to hold that space, it actually is of tremendous value to
Mhm.
the trans and non binary person. Obviously, you'll learn in the process as a person having made a mistake, but there's just so much there. And
Mhm.
that includes people yelling or maybe having a heightened response, even a response that might feel maybe because we don't have the full understanding, it might seem out of place or
Mhm.
like overblown, right? And even if somebody is yelling, recognizing it, like, of course, you as the person who made the mistake, you're part of it, but it may not be fully about you, right?
Right. I was actually going to ask about that. I was going to redirect something because that's such a key part, right? That
Yeah.
when somebody's having a big response, it's almost certainly not exclusively about you or what you've said.
No, no. And it feels like that because, of course, it's directed
Mhm.
or maybe even around you. Maybe it's not specifically directed, but you're there, right? And you're
Right.
feeling it. It feels like a lot. But if you're able to hold the space, it's somebody solid to receive that. It's not that
Mm.
you have to take ownership for all of it, right? Because again, it might most certainly is not 100% about you. It's probably a series of things, right? Particularly for trans and non-binary folks, keep repeating themselves. So
Mhm.
you might be the safe place where that all comes to a head.
Mhm.
And if you're able to listen to it, obviously we all have our own things. So if it doesn't feel safe or a whole number of things, obviously you you know can be like, hey, can we continue this conversation in a minute? I'm not feeling up to it. You can say that,
Mhm.
that's okay. But if you are able to hold that space, there's actually somebody is able to come out the other end of that in a way that has healing and provides some sort of insight and for everybody involved. So and as long as you can hang on to the fact that it's not 100% about you, that you
Mhm.
have some percentage responsibility, but there's something else going there, and that there's a beauty to that,
Mhm.
even though it's kind of really wow, it's big, but there's also tremendous value and benefit.
I want to ask you my favorite topic,
Mm.
mistakes that the people in front of me have made. So, can I ask you about mistakes that you've made or examples that you've got of
Mhm.
where this has kind of shown up for you?
Yes.
Assuming there are any and you're not just,
Oh wow,
you
yes.
know.
Like, I've never made mistakes ever. Um, yeah. So I will say I mentioned it briefly earlier on that I am an ally to people in my community. So, as a trans man, I'm an ally of non-binary folks, right? Or I'm an ally to two-spirit folks. And then I also have experiences on other equity topics, whether they be race and ethnicity, disability, women's issues. the list is long. I will say, and I think sometimes cisgender people are surprised that trans people also make mistakes with other trans people.
Mhm.
Like, the expectation is that we've got it all dialed 100% of the time with each
Right, yeah.
other, which we do not. Little behind the curtains secret here. um,
Right.
Inside
You
scoop.
know, I misgender myself on a regular basis.
Right? That's like a deep cut. Like, it's such a thing. Oh my gosh. Yeah, even ourselves, to ourselves. Uh, but there is one particular story about I, about 2 years ago, really failed a two spirit person. I won't go into the details to keep those private, but I just was not able to show up in a way that was needed at a particular moment. And fortunately, this person told me that,
Mhm.
oftentimes trans and non binary and two spirit folks, they don't feel safe, confident, whatever the case may be. They don't share that something's gone out. So I was like, just thankful that anything was shared,
For
um,
sure.
as a step number one. But of course, I went through my reactions, as somebody who provides this training of like how to be an ally. Uh,
Mhm.
I, felt deep amount of shame, as it wasn't just a small thing; it was a big thing,
Mhm.
and I doubted my capabilities. I wanted to melt into the floor and
Mhm.
preferably away into the mountains, never to be seen again. Just
Just get a
like,
cabin in the woods and stay there.
it's over. I'll just chop some wood.
Just remove
Nobody's gonna
myself from
get.
society.
Which is like, it was a big reaction. I was like,
Mm.
so I gave myself a moment to, and of course, I did not share this reaction with this person. It
Yeah, of
was to
course.
myself, right? But then I realized very quickly that in showing up with that person to hear what the impact was, I needed to be a solid person. Because when I kind of have this big reaction and, melt into a puddle, like, there's nobody there to share information with, right? So it's
Mhm.
just like, you just kind of have this ghost of a person. Um, and that's not helpful to that person who's trying to share information about how I impacted them negatively. So I was like, okay, I got to be solid. I got to listen. I got to
Mhm.
receive. I've got to, active listening, reflect back what I heard from this person. And I got to come with be willing to listen to what they think is important to mend the relationship, to account for my missteps. And then I want to come with my own ideas of what I'm going to do, particularly to prevent this from happening again. Like, on and on
Mhm.
and on. So, is there's no value and could even be a bit harmful for me to totally, just go on about the apology, that approach, or,
Mhm.
avoid it or whatnot. And what I will say is that going through that process, it wasn't pleasant. It was uncomfortable. It was difficult. But it was good to talk through it in a way that, again, provided that person space. They were able to make a few connections of things beyond what happened.
Mhm.
And we just had, it was like a connecting moment. I mean, I can't speak for them, but for me, it was.
Mhm.
There was a bit of closeness that was created. And it didn't stop my journey of two spirit allyship from continuing. In fact, it deepened it. I realized I
Mhm.
need to learn way more on this. And it was like a spark that I was like, I got to pivot this.
Mhm.
Um, and I got to do my own journey. And as a result, because of that commitment or that decision, a bunch of things came in where I'm being invited to ceremony. I'm being invited to, a lecture. Things come across my feed. I say yes, and so I just like have gone on a year and a half or 2 year journey, and I'm not done. Right, like,
Mhm.
it's pretty much forever that
Mhm.
but I now have way deeper understanding. By no means perfect, but now I know how to show up, even more than
Mhm.
before. And so it's there's something to be said about, yes, missteps happened, and now is it going to be am I going to just melt and nothing happens, or is this a catalyst to that deeper journey?
I really love the way you describe that kind of gratitude
Mm,
towards having an experience that is a horrible, uncomfortable, and
mm,
uh, hopefully not an experience that's going to show up again.
yeah.
Like all of that is true, but also there is all this other stuff, this positive stuff that have come from it.
Mm,
And obviously, it would have been better if that hadn't happened in the first place. But if it
absolutely.
hadn't,
Yeah.
and if this person hadn't felt comfortable to share that with you,
Mm,
really in correcting you, they gave you a real gift of
mm,
being able to keep learning
yeah.
and growing.
I will say one other thing is that they were a bit surprised
Oh, really?
that, you know, I listened. I
Right.
think they were prepared for something else, and I'm sure that is because of past dismissing of issues or discounting. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's why I share this allyship journey to inspire others to hold that space, because it is so powerful and
Mm-hmm.
people may not be getting a lot of it, and that we play a pivotal role. And it also returns agency to that person, where agency is so frequently removed from trans and non-binary folks. So in if something, because time and time in their surveys, the common response is that I don't ever want this to happen to other people. Like, yes, it
Mm-hmm.
happened to me, not great, but if things can change going forward, then I'm really that's a good thing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's key.
Can I ask you, and I think this probably could be its own episode, but can I ask you, and we have touched on it briefly in other episodes, but about impact versus intent?
Mm, mhm,
And there's something else that you mentioned in a previous episode that I want to ask you about that kind of ties into that, which is where you preemptively sort of explain that you're going to make a mistake and you prepare other
mm,
people for a mistake that's oncoming,
right.
even though you haven't actually made one yet. So I feel like those are, yeah, intertwined.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So, yeah, I'll start with the intent versus impact. In various communities, there's a discussion about what you focus on when missteps are made or
Mm-hmm.
challenges occur or discrimination. And certainly from a legal perspective, it is like when there's human rights discrimination. So, this is on the really like egregious side of harm.
Mm,
Impact is what's focused on, right? Like,
of
doesn't
course.
matter the intention. If somebody is irreparably or a large degree of harm has been created, that's what's measured. Now, when we're on the more subtle or kind of smaller scale harm, that's where maybe there's a flip in that, right? Where intention can play a bit of a factor in the interaction. Now, it depends on the person. We don't want to presume that our positive intention is gonna be what's enough, right? But as I was mentioning, trans people generally have a pretty good sense of having interacted a lot with folks and many missteps. They generally have a pretty good sense of who is trying hardest, but maybe just misses the mark and wants to keep trying, right? That's another key part of it. It's not like you kind of give up and be like, well, whatever, but like want to keep going, right? Versus the people who are just like, nah, this is not a thing. So people can and will have a lot more space for people who are trying their best. And this is something very new to them and they want to get it, but maybe need a little bit more time. Like people have a lot of time and patience for that. Most trans and non binary folks do. They feel very encouraged and touched that people are making an effort, right? That comes across very clearly. So intention does play a very important role, right? And then, the impact, there can be an impact, but maybe it's mitigated by the intention, right? So there's a bit of a balancing act. Now, again, it's the subtle side. Egregious side, impact is the only factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say that to your second question, some people they say, they kind of preempt their mistake, as you were mentioning. And, when meeting somebody for the first time that, say, uses they, them pronouns, they're like, I'm going to mess up a lot, right? And I get why people want to do that. They think probably that they're going to soften the blow a bit, right, of that, and also set say kind of signal I come in a good way, right? But unfortunately, there's a few things. There's the one, it can be annoying to trans and non-binary folks. Like, just being honest here, it's like it's not just one person that says that. It's, a lot of people say it. Also, I think people discount how much they're capable of. And
Mhm.
if you kind of label yourself as somebody who's already going to make mistakes, you kind of like create a pathway mentally, even though you don't intend to, for
Mhm.
mistakes to be made, rather than reapplying that energy to trying to be as conscious in the moment as possible. Now, you don't always have to do that. Like, as you get better with things, you can start to kind of let go of needing to pay attention. But for the initial period, I think it's valuable to have a little bit more being conscious with that person, and just sparing that person the I'm going to make mistakes. Like,
Mhm.
eh, I don't know. What do you think about that? What's your reaction if you've experienced that before?
I mean, yeah, it's a bit annoying. That fear of getting it wrong ends up making it more frustrating for the people on the receiving end of that. So that would be what my view of that is.
Yeah.
Uh, it's actually better almost to try and maybe make a mistake, but
Mhm.
just be seen to try and not lead with the mistake. Because then that's all I would think about is I'd be waiting for the mistake
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Or I
You're
could
right.
see that some people could.
Yeah, like kind of bracing for impact, right? Because
Mm,
this has been preempted rather than, you know, it happening and then addressing it in the moment, right? Um,
hmm.
it's kind of like, using the Nike slogan, just do it, you know?
Right, yeah, yeah.
You can, and
Wait.
you can do it. That's for me
Hmm.
is always like, for me, it's about practice, right? It's the intentional application of focus and then really making a concerted effort rather than just being like, oh, I've covered everything now because I've said this thing, right? It's like,
Hmm.
where are you going to apply your energy? Is it, to try to cover things up, or to apply the energy needed to make the change? Because it is our need to change. It's not the other person's, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
it's because we've been programmed in this way. And yeah, there's a bit of effort to deprogram. But the journey is well worth it. So,
Hmm.
and also I think there's a degree of like, people want to be seen as good, myself
Yeah.
included, right?
Hmm.
We're good people, but I think removing whether we're good or not to the side and just focusing on the nuts and bolts, the practical
Hmm.
stuff. And then you're not kind of going up and down emotionally based on
Right.
what you're doing. You're just kind of
Yeah.
steady. My thing is like, everybody's good, right?
Yeah. You could trust that you are good for
I
sure.
mean, everybody has their own conclusions, and I respect those. But in my mind, everybody's good, trying their best, and let's really focus on the effort portion.
Hmm. This fear of getting it wrong and making mistakes definitely comes up a lot in workplaces. I know that you have the stress-free allyship sessions that you do.
Mhm.
Could you give us like an overview of what that would look like in a workplace?
Absolutely. It's one of our newer offerings, and it comes at a time where, as you're mentioning, there's just a heightened pressure in
Hmm.
work in general, but specific to gender diversity. And so, education is an important tool, but it's not the only one. People need kind
Hmm.
of safer places to have small group dialogues to kind of sort out the issues,
Hmm.
at their pace and where they're at, and, et cetera. And there's a lot of stress. I will say we've probably got about 15 or so stressful thoughts that we hear on a recurring loop, no matter the org, or no matter the level of leadership. Like,
Hmm.
it's on repeat. We sense this as a pretty important thing to unpack, but usually there's not a way to do that in a very effective or safe way, except for this method that we have that we've put into action, and with a lot of really powerful results, where we basically, in a group of 10 or fewer people within an organization, we unpack a stressful thought. One example that I gave is, my mistakes will hurt trans people. And we have a series of questions, so it's a very structured conversation, but one that has a lot of flexibility built into it to allow people to kind
Mhm.
of meander and connect dots, and figure out how they're going to do it. So it's never prescriptive, but it allows surfacing of best practices and dialogue between peers to be like, this worked for me, maybe it could work for you. So, of course, I'm facilitating it, or other facilitators, but it's very organic, very constructive, kind of collaborative thing that we develop together or do together. And it unlocks all these areas where people get stuck. They kind of eddy
Mhm.
around my mistakes will hurt trans people and never get anywhere else, when there's actually tons of other things happening if people had the ability to see those. And
Mhm.
so we ask these questions, and then we do what are called turnarounds to the statement that allow people to see there's much more going on than just the thought that I have here that's stressing me out.
Mhm.
So my mistakes will hurt trans people. Maybe they won't. And then we provide examples for that. Uh, Maybe they'll help trans people. That's a bit of a stretch
Mhm.
for folks. They're like, what? My mistakes will help trans people?
But
Uh,
in some cases.
yeah. I mean, again, with that holding space piece, that could be a very
Mhm.
powerful trust building, connecting moment for folks. Again, it's not going to happen with everyone, but maybe there are opportunities for that. And then, my mistakes, my mistakes will hurt me. And this is where
Mhm.
people are a bit surprised that, yeah, they're often focused on the trans person, but they too can also be hurt by perfectionism, expecting
Mhm.
things to happen right away, a whole number of things, right? And so we're just
Mhm.
trying to fill that picture out. And once people see all these things, they're actually able to like totally relax, see and be present, and be more confident knowing that they have it. And so it's all these beautiful side effects that we really think are powerful for the workplace, and for folks to de-stress and not
Mhm.
be so worried about the outcomes, and be there for each other.
The session that I joined
Mm.
back in February was actually really, I think, really powerful. A lot of people really got a lot from that, and you could really see how those turnarounds were making people to completely rethink the way that they've shown up in the world with not just trans people, but
Yeah.
really with everybody.
Totally. Yeah, this is very more broadly applicable. And
Mhm.
you can, of course, it's nice to have specific instances to apply it
Mhm.
to be like, that didn't quite, I didn't feel great about it, but what else, right? And so
Mhm.
get to explore that. But then, yeah, your kids,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
spouses, or partners, and, volunteer buddy, whatever. So it helps
for
in general.
sure.
In a similar vein to stress-free allyship, we also have another small group discussion based configuration or offering. And here it's focused on practicing. So oftentimes, education sessions kind of provide you the theory, or just like there's practical pieces, but people haven't had the ability to apply them. And so they're like, yeah, I know in concept what to do, but just never had to like say the words or
Right.
do the
Yeah.
things, in real time and ad lib,
Mhm.
and so that's where practice pods are like this safe space with 10 or fewer people, and you go through role playing, right? I'm going to be the disgruntled patron, and you're the staff who's addressing the issue, right? And
Mhm.
it's really hard. And then we do a bit of fishbowl. So, maybe me and another person or a few people, do the role play, and then others are watching it, and then they get to talk about what they saw, or they could even pause the role playing and say, can you ask this question or say this thing to kind of add to it. And so it's this really
Mhm.
cool dynamic collaborative way to actually experience the tips and tools, and be able to put it in your own words too, because
Mhm.
you have kind of high level tips, but everybody has their own tone approach, and you want to make it your own too.
Mhm. It's so valuable. I think that's such a valuable kind of aspect because when it comes to dealing with trans and non-binary people, this is something that people really worry about. They really
Mhm.
worry about like the way they're going to come across or what they're going to say. Having a kind of safe space where the whole point is to get those mistakes out and to figure out the the correct way to do it. Is like, it's very, very valuable, especially in the context of work where it matters. Maybe, I mean, it always matters, but there's like an extra level there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it just allows them to establish that rhythm and have a
Hmm.
deeper understanding, and also to make it more accessible. Sometimes
Hmm.
people have this thing, oh, it's going to be really difficult. And then
Right.
they do the thing and are like, oh, actually, I was way better than I thought,
Hmm.
And, I got a few tips and tools to tweak it, but on the whole, I'm doing good, So
Hmm.
that's a good confidence boost. Or to adjust things, like I was inclined to go this way with the interaction, but actually I learned maybe it's better this way, right?
Hmm.
So when somebody comes out for the first time, cis people can be inclined to say, "Oh, you're so brave," right? Like that kind of thing. And just
Hmm.
realizing actually a lot of many trans people are gracious and are like, "Yeah, I get what they're trying to say," but
Hmm.
many it's annoying, right? And so just even knowing those kinds of things in the process of practicing to kind of redirect folks. Okay, what do I say instead? And then practicing
Hmm.
that, right? So it's a really cool opportunity. Yeah.
Well, I'll add links to that in the show notes, the stress-free allyship and the practice pod, if that would be cool. Do you have anything else you wanted to say about the fear of getting things wrong?
No, except that there's life beyond making mistakes and it's a beautiful one. So join us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kai.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was really great to talk to you about this. And bye for now.
See you. Bye.